Working for a boss ain't what it used to be. Should you start your own business? Ted and I will discuss it starting right now.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Ted, welcome back. You and I are experts on starting a business because we did.
Right.
Ted Michalos opened its doors about 8,500 days ago. You know
January 4th, 1999.
There you go. Over 23 years ago. So you and I know what it's like to start a business, and we've, of course, operated for
We survived.
2.5 decades or whatever it's been.
Right.
And because we're LITs, we also know what can go wrong because we have a lot of clients who come in, and that's what has caused some of their difficulties.
Right.
I did some research on the internet.
Okay.
So you know it's true.
Got to be right.
And I discovered that since the lockdown started in 2020, a huge number of people became self-employed or started their own business. Does that surprise you?
It doesn't. I mean, tell me what you did to find that out. Are these people that actually registered their businesses with the government?
I just went online and there was an article in some news site
and they just said, I've opened my own business. So these aren't side gigs for people anymore. This is a real business.
Right.
Or it didn't really define it.
But you're right. I think a lot of them were side gigs.
Right.
That turned into businesses. So why would someone have started a business during the pandemic?
Well, I mean, the opportunity was there, certainly. If you weren't able to work at your regular job and therefore the only income you had was the CERB, maybe it was the time to open a business because you've got that guaranteed government assistance short term.
Yeah. If you lost your job, what else are you going to do?
Everybody's gotten used to eating, and eating requires money.
Yep. I like to eat. I'm a big fan of it. So, yeah, I mean, you're locked. You can't work at your restaurant anymore.
Yep.
So why don't I do a bit of catering on the side? Why don't I whatever?
You know, an easier comparison with all the hairstyling folks, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were renting a chair or working for somebody. The salons were all closed. Well, there were still people getting haircuts, so they do it in your home.
They found a way, or they, in the summer they did it outside. Come to my back deck. So I think it was out of necessity that a lot of people started their own business. So let's go back down memory lane here and talk about Ted Michalos.
Are you going to put some kind of music in the background that makes it sound like we're thinking into the past?
Exactly what we'll do. We'll have some weird music here.
Right.
That'll annoy everybody.
Anyway,
so why did we start Ted Michalos, and more specifically, why you? Because you and I were both working at the big accounting firm at the time.
Well, memory lane here. We were instructed in what was it? I guess it's the summer of '98 to appear at a conference for this new big accounting firm. That I guess, are we not mentioning PricewaterhouseCoopers?
We will not mention PwC. No, we don't want anyone to know who was.
Everyone in our field of study, which was the specialized services, insolvency, business valuations, you name it, all that sort of stuff, was required to attend this meeting. And at that meeting, we were basically told that the odds of us ever being made partners were slim to none because we'd never generate enough revenue.
Yeah, I think their target per partner was $4 or $5 million US in profit.
Right. So there wasn't a single Canadian partner in the firm at that time that was generate that in revenue, let alone profit.
Like it was just totally ridiculous.
So we took that as a sign to say, well, they obviously don't want us here anymore.
Absolutely. And so I remember that well because it was in Boca Raton in August, which is in Florida, which is bloody hot.
And I had to cancel a family vacation at that time. I don't think you did. I don't remember.
I don't recall, but I remember you couldn't go outside because it was so hot. They had us all double booked in hotel rooms because the merger had just happened with whoever they had merged. I guess it was Coopers and Lybrand, where you and I were working, had merged with Pricewaterhouse. So they didn't have enough hotel rooms for this new merged firm.
Right.
So we're all doubled up with people from other, countries and whatever.
And my guy checked out early and he'd watched a bunch of adult movies. I got stuck with the bill and had to explain it. It was very nice.
I think my guy was from California, and I don't know if I ever saw him or not. But it just, the whole thing didn't make any sense. And so.
And it left a pretty bad taste.
Yeah. I think in my case also.
Well, you had just joined the firm.
Yeah, I was at KPMG for 10 years, I guess, and got in the GTA, got recruited away to come to Waterloo to be the guy running the two-man operation.
We needed a trustee,
and I was also a CBV.
Yep.
And so I thought, okay, good. This is kind of the path to partnership. But it became pretty clear pretty quickly that wasn't going to happen.
Right.
Because the office was not big enough to support a partner in that particular industry. And then, of course, we get this dropped on us that there aren't going to be any partners in Canada anyways, the way the math works.
So I don't know. Does that mean we did it out of necessity? I guess They certainly forced our hand.
Yeah, I guess what we could have done was continued to work there. I mean, we weren't going to be fired or anything, but that office, well, certainly in Waterloo, no longer exists.
Right.
That practice area no longer exists.
Yep.
PwC and KPMG no longer do personal insolvency work,
which is something we could sort of spend some time at.
Well, yeah, and so had we stayed there, we wouldn't be there anymore.
Right.
So I think we saw the writing on the wall, and off we went. So let's go through the reasons why you should start your own business.
Okay.
And then we'll go through the reasons why it perhaps is a bad idea. So
let's focus on the positive ones first.
Right. So and you have no cue cards. I've got them all here, so you get to do this all off the top of your head. Which
you enjoy this more.
I do. So give me some positives. Why should you start your own business?
So you recognize that you can provide a service or a product that either others are not providing at all, or you can just do it much better. So you've got something saleable for the public. That's a pretty good reason to start a business. You don't have an easy alternative way to deliver that same service or product. So maybe you're working for somebody else in a completely unrelated industry, and you've been doing this little side hustle, and you realize, wait a minute, there's a real job here because there's a demand for this service or product. That's the best reason to start a new business, because you know that there's a market there, and you're pretty sure you can tap into it.
Yeah, and the things that I put on my list here, control over your own destiny.
Yeah, so I guess, that's okay. That's still positive, right?
It's, we knew that had we stayed with the old firm, eventually we wouldn't be there because someone 4 levels above us would have said, oh, well, you guys are too expensive. We don't need you, whatever.
There's a negative associated with that too, though, right?
Right, and we'll get to that. I mean,
Okay.
I guess the other positive way of expressing the same thing is potentially you've got more freedom.
Right.
I mean, if you're your own boss, well, I guess you decide, do I work the 9 to 5 shift, or do I like to start early? Do I like to work late? Whatever.
Am I going to put 80 hours in this week because I get the direct return on it? Or am I going to work 35 hours? It's 5 o'clock. I'm out of here because
Exactly
there's no
right.
incentive otherwise.
So you may be able to make more money because you're going to work more, or maybe you've got better control of your time. You can spend time with your family, whatever. So there may be some advantages there. There may also be some tax advantages.
Yeah, the tax one, I guess we'll spend more time on this, I'm sure, but it's complicated. It's not as straightforward as I won't have to pay as much tax. So you pay tax on income. So if you're not paying as much tax, that means you're not making as much money.
But there may be some ways to structure things, or you may end up paying more.
That's right.
You never know. And I guess the ultimate reason is, well, the boss can't fire you because you're the boss. Now, if you're working for individual clients, they can fire you.
Yeah. And if it turns out that your business skills are not what they should be and the business fails, you'll fire yourself.
So it's not a guarantee. Okay, so then let's go through then how you can get into trouble by starting your own business. And just to define our terms here, when we say start your own business, we don't mean you form a corporation, rent a building, and hire 12 employees. We're talking about you are self-employed in some manner.
Hypothetically, the 14-year-old kid that's got a rake over his shoulder and knocks on my door and says, "Mr. Michalos, I'll rake up all the leaves in your yard for $20," is in business. Now, he won't be in business long because I got 5 acres.
That's right. And as we're recording this, the leaves are all like frozen at the moment. But yeah, and that can be anything. So the person who makes crafts and sells them online, that's being self-employed. It could be something small. It could be something big.
But for the purposes of our discussions, we're not talking about a side hustle. We're talking about this is your primary source of income.
Yeah. Now it may have been a side hustle. Right. That may be how it started.
In fact, that's a safe way to do it.
And that's exactly the way to do it. So, okay. So what can go wrong when you start your own business? What are the things that pop into your mind?
So from a financial perspective, we start here because we're guys that are involved with finance. The term is undercapitalized. You haven't planned for the fact that you're not going to have significant net income or profits, money that you can take out of the business in the short term. And the reason, at least statistically, that most new businesses fail is because they don't plan for that restricted cash flow. For the first little while, you've got to build up a revenue stream. You've got to cover all those costs of creating the business. And if you don't plan for it, which means having some savings or something you can draw on, suddenly you're running up all kinds of personal debt to keep you alive, and it may just become crushing.
So let's take the example of the guy who starts a landscaping business.
Right. That's a pretty typical example.
A guy or girl,
a
person, an individual. And I'm going to go and I'm going to cut lawns and, do garden work and whatnot. Right. So first of all, I'm going to need a lawnmower, a tractor, a truck, a weed whacker, whatever.
Right.
So maybe you already have all those things, but do you have, industrial versions, or do you have some little electric one that you use to mow your own lawn? So there's the upfront capital cost of getting that stuff.
Right. And maintaining it.
But then there's also when you're working at a job, you get a paycheck every week or two.
Right.
But when you go to, the Michalos estate and become the lawn cutting person, you bill at the end of the month.
Mm-hmm.
So you of course pay your bills instantly when they come in, but I suspect there are other customers who, you send me the bill and it takes me 30 days to pay it.
Right.
So or longer. So there could be 60 to 90 days from when I did the work to when I get paid.
Right.
So you have to have cash not only to buy the lawnmower, but to fund your existence for perhaps 3 months.
Because we're back to you've gotten used to eating.
Exactly. It all cycles back to the same thing.
Well, and you got to do the math you can only charge whatever the going rate is. And if you're only collecting that on yourself, then you run the risk that, maybe you're actually making less money than you made before. You almost have to have, in a business like landscaping, employees that you're making money off of you're paying them one rate and you're charging double or 3 times it for the service.
Yeah, that's what leverage is. So you're right. If I have a lawnmower and it's a, subdivision lawn, it takes half an hour to cut it. Okay, well, how much can I possibly charge for that?
Right.
$1,000? No.
Yeah, the going rate, at least in Guelph where I live, is somewhere between $45 and $60 an hour.
So if it costs me, and I've got to supply my stuff and I've got to get there.
Right.
So unless you've got everybody on the street and you're going from one to the other, I might go there, do 2 hours work. I might be able to bill $100.
Right.
But then I've got, pack everything up, go to the next place.
Well, and worse, you're at risk that somebody will come along and they'll do it for $25 an hour because they haven't figured it out, or they want to work for cash anyway. And so they just, I'll cut your lawn, give me $50 and I'm out of here.
Sure. If the neighborhood kid will cut my lawn, then you're right. Here you go. The kid's, 16 years old. I don't need to put him on payroll. Here's a $20 bill, cut my lawn kind of a thing.
Right.
So you're certainly vulnerable to all of those things. When I look at it, there are 4 skills you need to have to be successful in business.
Okay.
You got to be a maker, a seller, a scorekeeper, and then I think you also have to be a visionary. So a maker is the person who can actually do the thing.
You have to deliver a service or a product.
Right. So, okay, cutting a lawn. How hard is that? I get a lawnmower. I go around and cut.
Right.
Okay, but do you know how to trim a hedge?
No.
Do you know the best way to, rake leaves, and do you know what fertilizer to be applying and all those other things?
Right.
So if you don't, then
you better learn quick.
Yeah, you better learn quick. And that's a simple example. Maybe, I want to be a roofer.
Right.
Okay, well, there's some skill involved in that too, right. I'm pretty sure.
And some liability issues if you screw up.
Yeah, so that's something you should be aware of. So, okay, I've done this as a side hustle, but doing it as a full-time gig is completely different.
Right.
One reason is probably scale.
Yep.
It's just bigger. So do you actually know how to do the thing?
Okay, so you're calling that one the maker.
Yeah,
okay.
And that would be, I guess, technical skill.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is, and you kind of alluded to this, is you have to be able to sell the service.
Right. If you don't have any customers, then it doesn't matter how great your widget is.
Right. And so I can certainly think of, there's lots of guys in IT, for example.
Right.
Who are programmers, network support people, whatever.
Excellent skills, but they couldn't talk to a human being if they, to save their life.
Yeah, they're computer people. And we're obviously stereotyping them.
And we're accountants. So
yeah, so we're even worse. Well, and when we started this operation, I remember thinking about that okay, you're certainly more outgoing than I am, but at our core, we are accountants.
And so we view the world in a very different way.
And it's all numbers, but the sales function is completely different than that. So, okay, you're starting this landscaping business. How are you going to get customers?
Right.
What's your plan?
Mm-hmm. Well, and do you recognize that there's some customers you don't want to get? right? That's a hard lesson to learn. But
That's
another show,
true.
maybe.
You want to be, well, and that's what got a lot of our clients into trouble.
Right.
So I remember one of the first receiverships I worked on back when I was at one of these big accounting firms we talked about. They made pool tables, for billiards.
Slate.
Yeah, slate, and they were pretty good stuff. And they sold all of them to Sears, which is a company that used to exist back then. And they had a catalog, and they had 2 pages in the Sears catalog one year. Mm-hmm. So they ramped up production and everything else. And guess what? Sears found another supplier. Boom, you're out of work. Well, now how are you going to sell all these pool tables?
Yep.
You're pooched. So you got to be able to make it, but you also have to be able to sell it. And so just because your neighbor says, oh, yeah, I'll let you cut my lawn. Right. Okay, well, you need more than one neighbor to be doing it. And you're going to gain customers and lose customers. So you want to be a dog walker. Great. What happens when they move out of town, the pandemic hits and they can walk their own dog? So can you replace the customers? The third thing, and this is where you and I come in, is the scorekeeping function.
Right. So it's not enough to do the work. Somebody's got to keep track of it, and you got to make sure you get paid for it.
Well, and do you know what all these initials mean? HST, WSIB, source deductions, payroll taxes, all those other things.
Am I allowed to use derogatory terms?
No, you may not. So, and that's probably another massive thing that gets people into trouble.
Yeah, I mean, our advice is almost always stick with what you're good at. If you know that you're the maker and the seller, but you can't keep books and records, then pay somebody to do it for you.
Well, and have you ever had any person get into trouble because they didn't pay their HST?
That's never happened.
Never happened.
Everyone always pays their taxes. In fact, they pay it early.
Early, yes. Well, and you get into trouble because there is this huge time lag.
Right. Well, and the government doesn't ask you for the money every month. Unlike,
everything else.
Yeah. Enbridge, you're getting your gas. Well, if you don't pay them, they turn off the gas. So the government, if you don't send them your tax check this month, they won't acknowledge that for probably a couple of years.
Yeah. So I'm a roofer. I start doing roofs. And is that the Canadian pronunciation of it? I think it is. Roofs. So at the end of the first year, I tally it all up and, look at all the money I made. I wasn't remitting the HST every month.
Right. So you got to take a big chunk right off the top that was never your money in the first place. And then, of course, you're going to have taxes due.
Right. And, I don't realize that until halfway through the second year when my accountant finally prepares the taxes and everything.
Yep.
And now I'm pooched because I was living off that money going forward.
Well, and let's add insult to injury. You figure out that there is that debt there and you get scared, so you don't file it. Mm-hmm. And now the second year comes around and you still haven't done your taxes from the first year. So now first year, second year, third year is when CRA is going to come looking for you.
Yeah, you're just too far behind at that point.
Right.
So, and we'll talk about some practical advice as to how to deal with all that. So you got to have a maker, a seller, and a scorekeeper. And the scorekeeping is, I understand how all this stuff works, or I hire someone to do it.
All the administrative details that are involved with running a business.
Yeah, which almost for sure you're not good at.
Right.
Because you didn't go into business to be an accountant. You went in it to do whatever that service or product is. So it's just not a skill that you probably have. The fourth thing I think you need to be is, for lack of a better term, a visionary.
Yeah, an entrepreneur.
Yeah, an entrepreneur. Can you see where that need is going to be?
Right. Do you recognize the opportunity and can you take advantage of it?
So you think dog walker, that doesn't seem like a thing. Well, but I guess if people are at work all day long, someone's got to walk their dog. Okay, I guess that actually is a thing. Well, but how much will people pay for it? How do I actually get these dogs? They're in their house. How do they can they take the bus to come and see me? How does it all work? So you need to be able to see all of that. So let's get back to the main question here then. Is it better to be employed or self-employed? So let's go to practical advice then.
Okay.
So let's start with this whole accounting thing then. Do you agree or disagree that before you become self-employed, you should sit down with an accountant and a lawyer, or is that overkill?
No, I think you've got to get some decent financial advice from somebody. So it may not be a professional accountant, it may not be a professional lawyer, but if you don't at least do some research, you may be setting yourself up to fail because you're good at something that you think is saleable, you can make money at. The government has put so many regulations in place that if you're going to be a small business, you've got to follow these rules or regulations or they're going to trip you up.
So what can an accountant do for you and what can a lawyer do for you?
Well, so the accountant can help you with the numbers. And at the end of the day, I mean, there's an expression when you and I started in accounting was cash is king. You got to make sure there's enough cash flow coming in to cover your ongoing bills and to pay you at least as much as you'd make someplace else, right? So the accountant can help you do all of that. The accountant can remind you that you've got to have systems in place for billing and for collecting. You've got to have a regular process for checking that your bank account's doing what it's supposed to do. Can probably give you some advice on credit card fees and that sort of thing as well. I mean, this is what they do for a living, particularly, small accounting firms that specialize in dealing with individuals. Their whole market is providing you with this scorekeeper function you called, the administrative details that they're good at, that you're not. That's their business.
Yeah, and there's two components to that. There's bookkeeping and there's accounting.
Right.
So accounting is, preparing the financial statements at the end of the year and doing tax returns. Yeah. Whereas bookkeeping is, okay, here's all the customers I billed this month. Yeah. And here's all the bills that I need to pay. Can you record it all so I know where I'm at?
It's all the ins and outs.
All the ins and outs. And I am a big believer in before you actually go down that path. I mean, okay, if you're starting it as a side hustle, fine, you can kind of do it yourself. But if there's any chance that the money's going to get serious, right, I think you're far better off paying some money to an accountant.
Yep.
And what I would do is whatever industry it is you're in, ask around and find out who's the accountant in that industry.
Yeah. What's the person that everybody goes to?
Right.
Are all the truckers dealing with this guy? Are all the landscapers dealing with this guy? Are all the doctors dealing with this guy?
And I can guarantee you that there are accountants who specialize in truckers.
Yep.
Because it's a special thing. There's certain things you can deduct, certain things you can't.
That's right.
Might as well go to that person who knows what they're doing. And my discussion with the accountant would be, okay, so what do I need to do? And they'll say, well, look, why don't you every month send me this?
Right.
You got 3 customers, you got 3 invoices a month, send me those, or let's set up an accounting system. That's something you and I never did, but it's only been 25 years. We won't tell everyone, but we run the firm with a spreadsheet.
It's a big spreadsheet.
It's a big spreadsheet. Well, and the reason we do that is because our business is simple. We don't have inventory, you don't have receivables, payables, anything like that. The cash comes in, we pay it out. It's real simple.
Right.
But that's the kind of discussion to have with an accountant. What do I need? Because if you can set it up front,
it's just one less thing to worry about.
It's way easier. So, and I mean, you've had this discussion with clients a lot too. I'll say to them, look, get a folder, put the month of January on it, and everything that happens in January, toss it in.
Right.
Now, I guess everything's electronic now, so okay, on your computer, have a folder.
Right. But all of that stuff is available now if you do a little search.
Right. And if you can get things set up and actually spend an hour or two every month organizing it, then at the end of the year, it's not so big a shock. Right. So I think that's the accounting side of it. Now, what about the lawyer side of it? Why would I talk to a lawyer?
Well, so you need to decide, are you going to bother to incorporate? What are your risks if you don't? And if you do, I mean, how do you need to structure this thing to make sure that you're protecting yourself and your family if something goes wrong?
So why would I incorporate?
Well, so the typical reason for incorporation is either to reduce your personal liability or so that you can do some advanced tax planning steps. And so we could do a whole show on either one of those things. But the idea with a corporation is that you've set up a separate legal entity. It's like your business has become a person, and that person is responsible for things that go wrong in the business. Well, if you're not incorporated, then you're the person that's responsible. Now, the practicality of this is somewhat limited in that if someone's going to sue your business, they're probably going to sue you personally too. But you never know.
Yeah. So if you, this was a very common scenario during the pandemic. The government, through the banks, gave out CEBA loans.
Right.
Canada Emergency Business.
$60,000.
$60,000. So if those loans went to your corporation and the corporation ended up failing, as we record this now in the spring of 2022, you are not personally liable for that.
Right, because the government didn't ask anyone to guarantee those loans.
Now, if you go to the bank and get a loan through your corporation, the bank's going to say, sure, we'll loan your corporation, but we also want to get your personal guarantee. We're going to put a lien on your house, whatever.
Right.
So incorporating does not protect you from a personal guarantee.
Right. And
you're also not protected from things like not paying your HST.
Yep.
Because the government will come after you for that. But if it's a, photocopier lease for the office, well, then they probably aren't going to require a personal guarantee for that. So there may be reasons to do that or not.
Well, and when you're a small business starting out, sometimes it's a little cloudy to see whether or not it makes sense too. But this is part of where the visionary thing comes through. If you know that 2, 3, 4 years from now, you got a high level of confidence you're going to be successful, better to incorporate early when things are small. But I mean, the purpose of this is not to tell people to incorporate or not incorporate. We're just trying to tell you there are things you need to look at before you open a business.
These are issues. So that's why you would sit down with a lawyer and, okay, what are the pros and cons? Now, I'll tell you what the I'll tell you what the cons are. It costs money.
Yes, usually it's a fair bit of money.
Right. And so if you incorporate, you're still doing your personal tax return, but now there's a corporate tax return to do as well.
Remember what I said. You set up a corporation that's like the business has now become this legal person. Everything you got to do for you got to do for them. So now you're doing things twice.
And so the corporation has to file an HST return, a corporate tax return, a EHT return, whatever. So do you want to take on all that extra cost? Well, there should be a benefit from it.
Right.
And I'll only say one thing on the tax side of things. You already said it before. If you make income, you pay taxes. Right. Whether it's in the corporation or outside, you don't. So the only real reason to incorporate from a tax point of view would be if the money is going to stay in the corporation, then there may be some advantages to that. But again, that's an accountant thing, not a bookkeeper thing.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing.
Advanced planning. That's not for this.
Right. But if you're going to be successful, you might as well at least be thinking through it. And you may say to yourself, you know what? I'm going to be a dog walker, and I love doing that. I'm never having any employees.
Right.
It's just something I'm going to do. Okay, well, then you probably don't need to get really, really advanced on it.
Yep.
So, okay, do you have those 4 skills? And then the financing we talked about as well. How do I know how much runway I need?
Yeah, it's almost impossible, but you've got to be able to predict what's going to come in from the business. And the advice is you do it 2 or 3 different ways. Hugely successful, moderately successful. What's the worst case scenario? And plan for the worst case scenario.
So what's the base though? So I know here's what my rent, my groceries, my stuff is.
Costs you $2,500 a month to live. I don't know, making something.
And so that has nothing to do with the business. That's just my own personal life. Right. So I got to probably have like 4 months worth of runway right there. I mean, that's $10,000.
Yeah, definitely at least 2, but
4.
Yep.
I guess it all depends. What business are you in and how quickly can you ramp it up?
And how quickly are you going to get paid? So is it something they pay you immediately, or you're going to bill them and then 3 months later you'll get lucky if you get a check?
If you're operating a car detailing service, well, people come in and they pay you that day, you know. But if you're doing something, landscape construction, it could be months and months.
You're an IT guy that's fulfilling a specific contract. You get paid percentage of completion or something. So you may not get paid for 3 months because you haven't completed enough of the work. Yeah,
you're designing some software or something. Whereas if you're the network support guy, well then, and these are key things to think about before you start.
Right.
Because when you were an employee, you didn't have to worry about any of this stuff.
Right. Your check's going to show up, assuming they're staying in business, which is a whole different show.
Yeah. Whereas now it's like, well, no, I have to make sure I'm getting paid. So when I'm negotiating that contract, I want to figure that out. When you and I started this company, we weren't very busy. And so one of the side projects I did through the company was to act as basically the CFO of a trucking company that was in financial difficulty. And I said to the owner, okay, I'll help you out. I'll negotiate with the creditors, all that kind of stuff. But every Monday morning when I come here, you're going to have a check for X number of dollars.
Right.
And if that check isn't there, then I'm not coming back.
And it better clear.
And I was helping manage the banking, so I knew at least that money was there.
Right.
Because if I had said, well, I'll bill you at the end of the month, we wouldn't have got paid. Right. The money wouldn't have been there. So you've got to be thinking about that right from the word go. That's not something a lot of people want to do.
Right. Well, so if you're a typical person with some sort of skills, this is the maker thing that we're talking about here, you're good at something, good enough that you think you can turn it into money. That doesn't mean you're good at any of this other stuff or comfortable doing any of this stuff. I mean, almost everyone undervalues their skills and services that they're providing. And so you send an invoice to a customer and the customer pushes back. Lots of people that are new to business, okay, they cave on it. They write it down somehow or they reduce the rate in the future. I mean, they don't feel that they've got the power. They're lacking confidence in what they're doing because they're new.
And I think that's a good way to end the show with the word temperament.
Right. Oh, temperament. I didn't use that word.
There you go. But I think that exactly describes it. Do you have the temperament for this?
Yes.
So when your client says, I'm not going to pay that bill because that little thing you did over there wasn't exactly right. Okay, do you have a process in place? Are you able to deal with that?
Right.
Do you want to spend your day doing the stuff and then your evenings collecting money, going out and bidding on new jobs, all that kind of stuff?
Right.
Because if you don't, then this is not for you. So I think that's probably how I would advise someone. Do you have a skill, and do you have the temperament to do it?
Most new businesses fail. So that's my final word is as good an idea as you may have, most new businesses fail.
Yeah, and I think the stats are something like 80% of businesses don't last 5 years.
It's pretty damn depressing.
And because it's hard.
Right.
If it was that easy, everyone would have a business. And it's not just the thing, it's all those other things too, the selling, the scorekeeping, everything
It's all the damn other things. I mean, most people that go into business, the maker part is the easy part. You've got a skill or service you can deliver. All the other stuff is what trips you up.
Yeah. So I think if you're having this thought in your head, well, talk to someone or a bunch of someones who have already done it.
Yeah.
What was it like? How much work is it? What kind of money can you really make? Do I have the temperament to do it? Do I have the resources to fund it? Because it's going to take a while. And if you do, great. And if you can start it off as a side hustle, that's almost always better because then you can try it out.
That's right.
I'll cut lawns on weekends and then make it a full-time thing later. And then you can at least fail quickly and not, have a whole lot of debts. But I do also believe talking to an accountant or a lawyer up front is not a bad idea. So there you go. There's our random thoughts on whether or not you should start your own business. It's up to you.
Right.
But think it through, give it a whole lot of thought before you do. That is our show for today. Thank you for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit the likes and the subscribes and the notifications and all those other buttons. And of course, we're available on all the podcasting apps too. Please subscribe. New show every Saturday morning. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. Thanks for listening. That was Debt Free in 30.